Okay, so today we're going to be creating a toposolid and preparing the foundation on the toposolid for placing a structure on it. So we're going to start in our residential default template, and once there, we're going to switch from our first floor view to an elevation view, such as the east elevation, and we're going to want to delete all of the levels except the first floor level. So simply select them and delete. Once we have our first floor level, we want to jump back to our site plan view, and we want to create a toposolid by going to our massing and site and then hitting the toposolid button. Create a rectangular toposolid about 100 to 200 feet wide by 100 to 200 feet wide, centered as best as possible around the blue icon that looks like a triangle with a circle that you see on the screen. If it's not centered, once you create your toposolid, you'll be able to move it. So once I have about the 200 by 200 rectangle, I'll hit the check mark and then I will select the toposolid once again and move it to be about centered. And so that at this point we can move back to our first floor plan and we can actually see our toposolid in our first floor plan. Now, either here in the first floor plan or in the site plan view, we can go back to the top under Modify and hit Modify Sub-Elements. So we can see that our toposolid is made up of 4 points, and these 4 points are connected by these dotted lines. These 4 points define the base height of our toposolid. So because I'm modeling the side of a mountain, I'll be raising the top 2 points in order to get them to be about 60 to 70 feet off of 0, which is our ground, which is those 2 points at the bottom. So we'll put 60 feet on the left dot and 70 feet on the top right dot, just to give it a slight variation, and we'll see how this plays into effect later on. So now that we have that, and we know that our bottom 2 are 0, we can go into Add Point under the Modify Toposolid command, and we can offset from height between 5 and 10 feet. And what this means is that each dot we place will be about 5 to 10 feet offset from the ground. And with that, we can start placing dots. Start from the lowest point on your toposolid, moving your way up as desired, and then we just want to create these lines that will kind of show how the toposolid slopes upward. You don't really have to place much thought into it as long as you're going from the bottom to the top and from side to side as much as possible. So you can even place dots on the dotted line, but it won't let you place dots past the dotted lines. So we'll see that we'll just add some peaks and some slight variation just to give some randomness and some natural look to the toposolid. So we'll just quickly finish that up here, and we'll see that we'll even go on the top line, and that means at that point will be even higher than that 70 foot point that we had made earlier. And then another thing that once you have all your toposolids in is that, as you just saw, you can go back in and add some random toposolids, and that will create some further variation in your toposolid. From this point, if you go into your 3D view, you'll actually see that you have a slope and you have a toposolid, and you can see that it's very rugged and it looks kind of like the side of a mountain. And to improve performance, something you can do is that you can once again select your toposolid and hit Simplify Toposolid. You can keep the percentage point at 80%. If you wanted to remove more, you could obviously lower that, but I feel like this is a good place, and so we'll just leave it at that and hit OK, and we will see a slight change right now in our toposolid, but it's not enough to cause any unwarranted issues. Now that we have our toposolid, we'll move back to our east elevation that we had earlier, and we'll be going to our architecture tab so that we can create a level. And this level will kind of show where the base cutout of our mountain will be, where our building will go. And so we'll use that original first floor labeled 00 level to kind of figure out how high we want it. So I'll put it at about 50 feet just to be around the middle of the height-wise of the mountainside. And then we want to make sure that we cover the entire toposolid to give us the most flexibility when actually creating that flat build surface. Obviously, it's a good practice to rename your level to something that you understand. In this case, I'll be renaming it Foundation Base, and we'll obviously be renaming the corresponding views just to make our life easier. Now we can jump back into our 3D tab, and we can actually see that we have successfully covered the toposolid with that level. And so at this point, we can go back into our massing and site, create an in-place mass, rename it whatever you like, and then we'll simply use the line tool to draw out, obviously on the foundation base, the shape of the cutout that we want to make. So in this case, I'm making a rectangle with an offset side just because that's the shape that I'm going for. And we'll just zoom in and make sure that our lines connect. We will create a void form, and we see that we only had one line selected there, so it only created one side of that void form. So what we have to do now is we just have to undo, make sure we select all 4 lines, and then do that again. And now we see that we have a rectangle, and that shows us kind of the space that's going to get cut out. And you can use those arrows to move around and get a different view. But as you notice, we'll get this error, and that is because we didn't tell Revit what to cut. Revit just knows that it's intersecting the toposolid, but it doesn't know that we want it to cut it. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that we have our void form selected, and then we'll want to cut. Make sure that we have our toposolid selected, make sure that we have our void form selected once again, and now we see that we have a cut, and our nice flat area has been created just by cutting. And the void form being a void form will not affect any other part of your structure and won't be visible in the final renderings at all. So from here, we see that we've created that basic flat cutout, and we can also see that the void form will not be affecting anything. And so if we wanted to create like a tunnel system or an opening directly into the side of the mountain, we could follow the same basic procedures, except instead of just doing a rectangle, we'll draw out the footprint of our entire quote-unquote tunnel system, or the cave, or whatever you're creating in this shape or way. So we'll just draw out a random shape just to kind of give you an idea. So we'll move our camera view to kind of get a better understanding of our layout, just because it's a top-down layout. We'll intersect that void form that we have earlier, and that obviously won't cause any issues, but it will allow us to get a clean cut. And then once again, we make sure that we deselect everything, and then we select all the lines from that floor plan or that layout, and then we'll do the same thing. Void form. And once we have the void form, this is where we use those arrows to decrease the height so that we're not cutting off the entire top of the mountain, but rather just in the mountain. And then once again, it's the whole cut. And select your toposolid, select your void form, and now you can see that we have a clean cut straight into the side of our mountain, and that's actually a tunnel that now exists inside of our mountain. And we can also see how you can layer multiple void forms to get multiple shapes out of the mountain. Now if we wanted to create a circular object or some other form directly on one of these faces that we now have, instead of using place on plane, we'll simply do the whole thing, but do place on face, and it'll be the same exact procedure. You draw your shape, you extrude the void form, you use the arrow to move the faces of that void form to cover the area you want removed. And then once again, it's the same. Select both the toposolid and the void form, and it'll cut it just like that. And then you'll see that now we even have it intersecting the tunnel. So if we look, we can actually see the tunnel that we had made earlier also intersecting. And then we can also do that straight onto the toposolid. So if we wanted to create an opening straight on whatever the contour of the toposolid is, it treats each of those toposolid faces as a face. And so we can actually use that same face to create another opening following that angle of that face. So we'll see that here we're just creating a shaft that goes straight down, and it'll intersect our other existing tunnel. So we can once again move the camera views and kind of get an idea of where we want it to go. So in this case, I'll just keep it nice and simple and go all the way through. And I will cut, so by selecting both objects and then cutting, and now we can see that we have the hole. And so now we've covered how to create the toposolid and how to create the voids within the toposolid and on top of this toposolid. And so now we get to the part where we need to add trees to the toposolid. And so the way that we'll be adding trees is we'll be going back into our massing and site, and we'll be adding site components. Under the site components tab, you will see that we have different trees available to us with different outlines and, more importantly, different heights. So we'll see trees ranging from between 10 and 40 feet in height. And it's as simple as selecting a tree and clicking on the toposolid to place it. You'll notice that right now in my current settings of realistic view, you'll actually see leaves and trunks and rendered details of the trees. But if we move something to not rendered, but rather shaded or outlines, we'll see that it actually shows us the shadow, and we just get these like gray blobs. And this is great for when you're first placing them, not only because you can tell how close apart they are, but you can also save on resources, and it'll take less time to place them because the computers will be faster and more responsive. So you'll just see me adding a random variety of different trees just to kind of give it a natural look and to make it more realistic. And we'll be switching different size trees, different type trees, and that will all work together to create a more cohesive unit of a mountaintop. And you'll see that as I approach finishing placing all of my trees, I'll move back into that realistic setting, and that will allow me to see kind of the final view of how that toposolid looks like. So you can see the different trees look differently, and obviously when you render it, it'll look even better than it does now. And that's about it.